In this video, I discuss the new stealth price hike that Games Workshop is trying out in the new Warcry releases, and where it might happen next. The newest Warcry set, Hunter and Hunted, came out weeks ago, and I haven't really had time to look at it, as I've been launching a new zine with my good friend Vince Venturella, link in the description below. I did notice right away that it came in a smaller box than usual. Instead of a giant 11 by 17 inch box about yay thick, like the previous releases, Nightmare Quest I think being the most recent one, this one came in a 9 by 12 box about yay thick. It included two forces, which are great sculpts. You've got the Gorger Mawpack and you've got the Wildercore Hunters, and it comes also with like a book that kind of explains the stuff and the stats and all that stuff. It comes with some cards and a single piece of terrain called a Maw Pit, which is also pretty cool. The previous big quarterly boxes always came with two forces as well, a book of scenarios and other special stuff and rules and things like that. Again, not a Warcry, core rule book. That was only in the Heart of Gur box that started out this new edition of Warcry. Otherwise, you had to buy that extra book separately. And then they usually came with some like cards and a 22 by 30 inch board, usually double-sided, and then of course, terrain. The number of pieces of terrain kind of varied a little bit from box to box, but not by too much. It was generally always enough to play a game of Warcry with. But in Hunter and Hunted, you just get the stuff that I mentioned. Two forces, a book, some cards, one terrain piece for $130 US. This is $20 more than the Crypt of Blood kind of starter box that they released back in August. Crypt of Blood is designed as kind of an easy and allegedly cheap way to get into Warcry. It comes with two smaller than usual forces, both pulled from old Warhammer Underworlds models. Great sculpts, I think. The Crimson Court are some of my favorite sculpts that GW's ever done. And then you also get a little bit of terrain, too, not very much, which I originally thought was just a piece that they took from the Garden of Moor set, which was the old kind of graveyard set. But upon looking at it and comparing, this is a whole new sprue. It's a completely new piece of terrain that hasn't showed up anywhere else as far as I can tell. Let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong. And then you also get like a paper mat, not a board, and then some tokens and dice. Crypt of Blood also has a book included, which has everything you need to know to start playing Warcry with the stuff that comes in the box, right? Plus some scenarios and some fluff and whatnot and all that. Now, it's not the full Warcry, core rule book, which generally costs about $50 and is about that thick, but it does include the core rules from the free Warcry core rule PDF download, which you can get at Warhammer Community on their website. It's like 26 pages long. That is basically printed in the back of this Crypt of Blood book. So overall, Crypt of Blood is technically a starter for Warcry, but it's a bit of a limited thing in that you don't get as many models, you don't get as much terrain, all that kind of stuff. But it's still far cheaper than the previous starter box, Heart of Gur, which was like $230 US. But, you get less. Anyway, back to the Hunter and Hunted box, which is the newest Warcry release. I thought it was weird that they were just making a new box for Warcry that pretty much just had two full forces and a single piece of terrain and some other stuff. There was no other terrain and there's also no board, right? Now, I'll admit, I had complained during the last season of Warcry. I hate that we're doing seasons like video games now. But during the last season of Warcry, I had complained about getting mostly the same terrain over and over and over again with each new box each quarter. They would slide in some extra stuff, but it was a lot of, it was oops, all meat trees in most of those boxes. But what if you wanted some terrain to add to your new Warcry setup, right? You bought this box and now you've got the Gorgers and you've got the Hunters and all that and the Maw Pit. I wondered about that a bit and then found out the answer several weeks later at my local game store. There also was a new Warcry box on the shelf next to Hunter and Hunted, and it was called Ravaged Lands, Scales of Talaxis. It was a new terrain set for Warcry that came out around the same time as Hunter and Hunted, and it'd include a board, double-sided, some tokens, some cards, and of course, a bunch of terrain. Now, the terrain was again, meat trees, but only I think a couple this time. It was also a bunch of really cool temple ruin, like chunks and stuff like that, including a big circular broken portal type thing, and some raised walkways made out of bamboo and such. With this and the other stuff I mentioned, you'd certainly have enough to play, full games of Warcry with a decent amount of terrain. I personally prefer my terrain layouts for Warcry to be a little bit more dense than this, but this box is good for most and a great jumping off point for people who like a little bit more terrain. They can add to it. So instead of selling the big box with 2 forces, terrain, a board, and all the other stuff, they were splitting the parts into 2 boxes. So you could kind of choose which one you wanted to buy, right? This seemed like a good idea. Give us, the customers more agency to pick and choose how we want to buy the new stuff that comes out for Warcry. Maybe, you're good on terrain, but you love the new figures, right? Or maybe you don't want the new figures, but you really love those temple chunks. You can get what you like. But then I had a thought, what if you wanted both? It seemed unlikely that they were going to go, in the future and release a big box with both of these things in there. It seems like maybe this is the new way going forward. It's a 2-box plan. Then I did the math, and I realized that the $130 Hunter and Hunted box and the $112 Scales of Talaxis terrain set came to $242 US if you bought them both. If you'll remember, the retail price on the last big box, with pretty much all the same stuff in it as far as amount of stuff, was Nightmare Quest, and it sold for $185. So there's the rub. Yes, we Warcry players now get some agency, some choice in what we buy. We can get the 2 forces box, or we can get the terrain set. We no longer are, forced to buy the big box to get the things that we want that are in it, even if we don't want, both things. However, if we do want to get both the figures and the terrain, then for this freedom of choice, we get to pay $57 extra. That's just over 30% price increase from the last big box, right? With Games Workshop, freedom of choice is certainly not free. Now, I get it. They need to produce 2 boxes for this stuff now instead of just the 1 box. And boxes cost money, sure. There are certainly some cost increases from turning what used to be 1 box of product into 2 boxes, separating the product and all that kind of stuff. And, extra warehousing and fulfillment, or I don't know, all kinds of stuff like that. But I strongly believe that it is not $57 more. This is a stealth price hike, plain and simple. Before, this kind of price hike used to come after initial launch. If you wanted to just buy 1 force, or another from one of the big boxes, you paid $60 for just the 1 force. If you add 60 to 60, it's 120, so, that kind of stuff. And if you figure out in comparison to the cheaper, bigger box, it made more sense in some situations to just buy the bigger box. If you just wanted to buy the terrain, they would sell those sets later on as well separately, but they were, again, generally a little bit more expensive than if you bought it all at once. That's kind of like a convenience fee, right? Like you paid more to just get the 1 force rather than the whole box. And in Warcry, and also, in Kill Team, it was usually 3 months after release of the big box. That kind of seems standard in this situation. If you wanted to get one of the forces, you had to wait 3 months after the big box. In this new scheme, however, you don't even get the option to buy the big box, get it all in one time, right? This just hits you with the price hike up front if you want to get the models and also the terrain. And you get charged 30% more, to seem like you have more choice. You technically do, but at a 30% price increase. So this seems like the plan going forward for Warcry releases. Instead of a big box with forces or terrain, that you might not actually exactly want, but you could probably resell or trade with your friends. Instead, now you get a 30% price increase for the 2 boxes if you want to get them both. And I'm guessing that this is exactly how the new Kill Team releases will be going forward as well. They've already showed us 2 separate boxes with Salvation and the Beta Decima upcoming releases for Kill Team. Maybe they won't come out with a new Warcry terrain box along with every new Forces box every quarter, right? Like maybe there'll just be a new box with 2 teams and a little terrain piece, like Hunter and Hunted, every quarter. And then the dedicated terrain set will be in production and available for the entire season, right? But we all know Games Workshop seems to love to underproduce and to sell out of product as soon as they can. So I'm not sure I'll hold my breath on that. And I don't know why they do that. I don't know if it's like a corporate thing, like, oh, look, we sold out. But it happens every time. The idea of the terrain set being available, like as a base for the entire season, seems a little unlikely, right? Either way, if you want to get what you used to get, in one big box, prepare to buy 2 boxes and pay more. I hope that this explains what seems to be changing with Warcry and seemingly Kill Team in the future as well. So what do you think? Do you prefer paying more to be able to pick and choose between buying the models and buying the terrain? Or will you miss the big boxes full of both, right? And the comparatively cheaper prices for both as well? Or will you just stop buying stuff for Warcry? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful and want to spread the word, help by hitting like and maybe even subscribe down there if you want. Thanks for watching.